Hello, welcome to KPFK's Local Station Board Election Debate Number 1. We are joined by John Suarez, Grace Aaron, Michael Novick, and Jeff Silberman. They each have 1 minute to present themselves, beginning with John Suarez.
That's me. Professionally speaking, I'm a retired psychiatrist. I was on the faculty at UCLA as a professor of psychiatry and also ran the section on law and psychiatry. More importantly, for this purpose, I had the privilege of serving on several boards, including the ACLU of Southern California, the Community Advisory Board of KCT when it was still connected with PBS, and I served as president of that board several years. And I spent almost 2 decades on the Board of Trustees of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. I learned a lot from those experiences, which render me comfortable in feeling that I may be able to contribute something to KPFK.
Thank you. Grace Aaron?
Hi, I'm Grace Aaron, and I'm a longtime board member of KPFK, and I've also served on the Pacifica National Board, which is the parent company of KPFK. And I'm a longtime peace activist, and I'm also running in this election with a group of really great candidates. We have a slate. John Suarez is on our slate, and hope you'll take a good look at all of them. I think they're really terrific, and we're looking forward to really improving the programming at KPFK and starting fresh with a new board and improving our impact on society.
Thank you. Michael Novick?
Yes, I am Michael Novick. I'm a former chair and treasurer of the KPFK Local Station Board and a former member of the Pacifica National Board. I'm the editor and publisher of Turning the Tide, a journal of intercommunal solidarity. And I'm also on the production and editorial staff of Changelinks, a community calendar and progressive news for Southern California. I'm interested in returning to the board. I'm running with the Grassroots Community Radio Coalition, along with Jeff, and I think we believe that a lot more has to be done to revive the station, to bring new audiences to our airwaves and new voices, and that we can do that by engaging with the community, bringing more of the spirit of and the ethos of social media, of interactivity to the broadcast operations.
Thank you. Jeff Silberman?
Thank you. I am also, as Michael mentioned, I'm running with Grassroots Radio Community Coalition. I'm an entertainment attorney and a literary agent. I work in the book world, motion picture, and television world. So I'm accustomed to sourcing ideas, cultivating them, and bringing projects into the world. I'm also accustomed to having to deal with both creative and financial constraints, limitations, confrontations, and reconciling them. And I work with many people from diverse communities with diverse voices, diverse perspectives. And so I think that I can contribute to the board in that way in helping KPFK improve, uplift its programming, reach out to communities that we're not reaching, and deal with financial constraints that we are currently facing.
Thank you. I'll now just briefly go through the format. So each of you are going to get one main question, which was randomly selected from the master list of questions, which is a historical list of basically topics that were submitted by yourselves as well as other listener members, and topics of just from previous elections. And basically each of you will get one randomly selected. I generated the sequence ahead of time. And for example, we'll start with John, and he'll address first for 1 minute, and then each of you will have 1 minute to follow up, and then John will get another minute to readdress, and we'll iterate through that twice. So the first question is number 12, and this goes to John Suarez. Do we need a program council? If one were to exist, who would be on it, and how would they get on it? What are the pros and cons of having a program council? John, you have 1 minute.
As a newcomer, I'm not familiar with the history of the program council, but in general, at least in theory, it could be a very beneficial undertaking, and of course, one has to be concerned with bureaucracy and having too many things going on. It would be, in my view, advisory only, and we'd have to explore how it may overlap with the Community Advisory Board, which I think we'll get to that issue as well later on. Ideally, a program council would be a dedicated group from any and all sources who would be willing to listen to many of the programs, see how they score against a set of guidelines, and such a council, if it's working properly, I believe would be helpful to the programmers and in terms of feedback. Concluding then, a program council, I believe, would be valuable under certain circumstances.
Thank you. Grace?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent answer. I think it could possibly be really beneficial to the program director, because the program director is human and can't usually listen to 109 shows. I think we have something like over 100 shows at KPFK. And also it would be good to have feedback from another group of people who can listen to the shows and rate them possibly, suggest improvements. It would have to be, the focus would have to be, I think, narrow, the participants diverse, so that there were different perspectives. It could work. I think it's worth trying. Let's see how it goes.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I was the chair, actually, of the last program council the station had. We were elected listeners tasked with coming up with criteria for evaluating the programming and procedures for doing so. We did come up with a list of criteria that would be useful for program improvement, and also suggested a process of self-evaluation by the programmer, peer evaluation by other producers and staff, listener evaluation, and management evaluation. And towards the end of our tenure, we did work closely with the then program director in evaluating both existing programming and proposals for new programs. And we worked with the Program Oversight Committee of the local station board to craft a proposal for an ongoing program council, which unfortunately kind of fell through the cracks when there were some management changes. But I think that those criteria would be very useful to still apply.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I think we're unanimous in feeling that it can contribute enormously to the quality of programming. I love what Michael just shared about what they accomplished when there was an active council. I think, too, that in terms of who could comprise it, I would hope that we have the ability to understand at KPFK who among our members are journalists, members of the creative community, people with some production expertise. And so I would suggest that ideally the council would be comprised of those sorts of people, so that they are actually coming to this with some sort of experience, expertise to contribute.
Thank you. John, you have a minute to respond?
Well, it's not much to say, since the panel is in agreement basically with the concept, at least in theory. So what remains would be those of us who make it to the board to create such a council and outline the parameters and their purpose and functioning, and hopefully it will be done and it will be valuable.
Great. Thank you. So moving on to question number 6, which goes to Grace. Aaron, what is your understanding of KPFK's and Pacifica's financial challenges, and how do you propose to resolve these problems? You have 1 minute to start.
We really need, in my opinion, to improve our programming. We have too many fund drive days, on-air fund drive days, running currently, and this is discouraging to the audience and also to the staff. This is, in my opinion, because our listenership is too low, so the main way to remedy that is by improving the programming, so that when we do on-air fundraising, we are reaching more people, and therefore probably more people will donate money, and the station will become more viable. This is basically what Lou Hill said in an essay he wrote many years ago. He was the founder of Pacifica Radio, which is the parent of KPFK. So I think that the financial challenges and the management of KPFK fully agrees that our top priority should be programming improvement, because that historically has improved our financials, our income.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I agree with Grace that the fundamental financial problem is the loss of listeners. KPFK has about half the listeners that we had about a decade ago. In this period that we've had mostly strip programming during the morning and evening drive times. I think that we need to have programming that shows much greater community engagement, that brings onto the air voices of people who are coming up with solutions for problems that we face, and I think that will attract the listenership, bring back people who stop listening to KPFK, and attract a new generation of people trying to make the world a better place and seeing KPFK as a vehicle for doing that. And I think if we bring those listeners back, we will have the financial base we need to further improve our programming, and we'll get on a much more positive cycle.
Thank you. Jeff?
Well, I agree with my good friend Michael and with my colleagues on the panel here. Programming is paramount. And I think one of the things that we're not doing an outstanding job right now is leveraging the fact that we are a network and that we are in major markets and we have the ability to create more national programming than we are, while at the same time recognizing that we are a Los Angeles-based radio station and that we can also address very, very local and specific needs and interests here. I think coupled with that, we need to rebrand. I think the identity of KPFK right now is not anywhere near where it should be. We have a huge asset. We have a radio signal in a major market, and we have a huge opportunity that I don't think we're taking advantage of. We are, in essence, a subscription service, not unlike Netflix or HBO, and they don't really have to keep calling us to remind us that they give us value. If we are giving listeners value, they will come, and they will contribute because of that.
Thank you. John?
The issue, I think, was financial challenges, and I agree wholeheartedly that improving programming and other things that can be improved would expand the listenership, and therefore we would expect from them more donations. I have trouble, even though I don't know all the details, conceiving that in the individual donations would be enough to have the full funding for the station, and therefore I think we should also consider things like special events, which are fundraisers, and also tapping foundations that can work with us or are willing to give us money. I think there's a lot of money out there. It's a matter of finding it, and I don't know if KPFK currently employs a fundraiser, but in the organizations I've been involved with, they have always been worth their salary and more. In other words, I think we need foundations that can provide us cash without interfering in any way with our philosophy or our programming, and also hopefully restore the funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. As I understand it, they're not giving us money currently, but I think that should be pursued as well.
Thank you. Grace, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yes, I agree with everything that's been said so far by my fellow panelists. I think that if we improve the diversity of our programming, it needs to be more diverse in terms of appeal to different demographics in our signal area, to different communities. It needs to be diverse in terms of subject matter, and we have a lot of national news. We need, I think, more local news. If we improve the way our programming deals with the issues of concern to the listeners in our signal area, I think that the funding will come from individual listeners and also from foundations, from community groups, et cetera. So I think improved programming is the way to go.
Thank you. So moving on to question number 3. Actually, it's question number 2. And this goes to Michael Novick. Describe your proposals to improve the governance structure. For example, how would you change the bylaws, the election process, the size and composition of the local station boards and the Pacifica National Board? You have 1 minute to start.
When I was on the National Board, I presented a motion to amend the bylaws to allow for elections every other year. Right now, we have a kind of strange process where we have elections 2 out of every 3 years. I think if we had a 4-year term and elections every second year, it would be easier to get people interested in the election process. I think the main purpose of the elections is to engage our listeners in thinking about the future direction of the station. And so the governance process and the election process needs to be oriented to that. When I was the chair of the local station board, we met in various parts of the city. We had meetings in Long Beach and other parts of the Signal area. I think that would be an important change we could try to make again. I think that the governance structure has to work to heal some breaches at the station in terms of bringing both the paid and unpaid staff together and getting the management and staff involved in a process of strategic planning for the future of the station.
Thank you. Jeff?
Well, I would suggest again, or at least my perception is that we don't yet have I don't have a sense that we are really part of a network and that we are connected as Pacifica. I hear the name Pacifica, but I don't really get the sense that we are the LA station that's part of the Pacifica Foundation. So I'd like to see us connect better with New York, with Berkeley, with Houston, et cetera, and with the other affiliates who are not part of the Pacifica-owned stations. Beyond that, I can't really say because I have not yet been in the trenches and have experienced the way Michael has what is actually going on day in and day out at Pacifica. And so, I don't really have much more to say about that at the moment. I imagine I will in the future if I'm fortunate enough to be elected.
Thank you. John, you have another minute?
Again, I'm an outsider as well, and I'm certainly not in good touch with what's been going on both at the local station level and at Pacifica. So that the details that have been addressed so far are beyond me at the moment. My task, if elected, would be to find out quickly, and I think I'm a good learner, quick learner, just how things proceed and how things are managed, and then I'll be happy to make my suggestions. I'm not bashful, so it would be a learning process for me. And as soon as that's finished, I would pipe in with whatever I think should be done.
Thank you. Grace?
Yes, the issue of Pacifica governance has been discussed by a lot of people who have been on local boards, on the national board, and people who are concerned. It's kind of a very interesting topic of conversation. There's a lot of complaints about the current governance system. On the other hand, people like the idea, I think, more or less, that it's democratic, that members can actually participate in the governance of the stations and of the parent nonprofit Pacifica as a whole. So I think we need to keep the democracy in our governance. We have to figure out how to make it simpler, how to make it more effective and more efficient. So I think it needs a longer dialogue about governance.
Thank you. Michael, you have another minute.
Yes, I wanted to add one other item. Excuse me. When I was the treasurer of the KPFK local station board, I introduced a motion to have the board take more responsibility for off-air fundraising, and I think that should be one of the responsibilities of both the local board and the Pacifica National Board, is to find ways to engage with the community and find, whether it's grants or other like-minded media and public spirit organizations that would help raise funds for the station So I think that would be an important role for governance to take on in the future.
Thank you. So let's see, moving on to the next question, and this question goes to Jeff Silberman. It is number 4. Please describe the KPFK target audience. Is KPFK programming representative of the needs of listeners and the listening area? Please consider demographics, age, race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and the political spectrum. Consider strategies for communicating with listeners to get their feedback. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, I think our target audience is human beings, or that's our core audience, I should say. Core audience right now are progressives, of course, but I think what we need to do is to expand the target beyond the people we're reaching. And I think we need to do that in a number of ways. There are many resources in Los Angeles that I don't think we're taking advantage of. We have local colleges, community colleges, and high schools where I think we can cultivate new voices, distinct voices, diverse voices of every ethnicity, of a younger demographic by definition because of those resources, and that we can cultivate people by podcasting initially and determining who really has something unique to say, who is attracting an audience, and then migrating projects that we maybe launch as podcasts onto the airwaves. But without a doubt, the Pacifica mission is to connect communities who, for whatever reason, historically have not been connected, and to discuss things that historically are not being discussed on mainstream media. That's our mission, and that's our obligation, and that's everybody's commitment on this panel, I'm sure.
Thank you. John?
I think the search for listenership or target should be everyone. I think I'm repeating what was said. I think all of us, regardless of sociopolitical ideology, can use the information and the education and the news that should be coming out of KPFK. We should try to identify specific groups that are not getting our message or that are not involved. This requires some testing and some research, but they should indeed be found. There are many individual ethnic and socioeconomic groups that we could find that need more work on our part. But I think of all the groups, to me, the ones that are not being involved enough are the youth. I think I would like to see our focusing specifically on youth, whether we're talking about the millennials or Gen X. I think our audience now is imbalanced in that we're catering to the older half of the population.
Thank you. Grace?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, that we need to diversify our programming in many ways. We need to appeal to younger people, middle-aged people, mothers, uncles, aunts, wives, teachers, union members, farmers. We have so many diverse communities in our signal area. There are people with special needs. There are the handicapped. There are new immigrants who maybe don't speak the language and they want to figure out how to get their kids a better education, how to survive better in Southern California. They may be new to Southern California. So I think that we need to think broadly in how we can find out what the needs are of different groups in our community and meet them to some extent, or at least discuss them.
Thank you. Michael, you have another minute?
Yeah, I think that anybody listening to this probably recognizes that the country and the planet are facing tremendous crises, and I think that if the station can begin to tap into the communities and organizations in Los Angeles that are solving some of those problems, people who are engaging in community gardening and permaculture, people who are reforming education, people who are dealing with problems of homelessness and housing, and begin to put some of those voices and solutions on the air, that will attract and serve the communities in this city in a better way, in a way that's not being met. I think we need to win back some of the people who have abandoned KPFK for NPR stations, and I think we need to bring in on the airwaves the voices of those younger listeners that people have mentioned, so that that spirit of social media and interactivity is tapped, and the creative resources of Los Angeles reflected in our airwaves will attract the people interested in those cultural and political solutions.
Thank you. Jeff, you have another minute?
Thank you. Yes. So I think I love what Michael just said about not only offering complaints that we often do on the air, but solutions and pathways forward. We have enormous resources here in Los Angeles. Among the ones I cited previously, we have 3 newspapers that I can think of off the top of my head. We have the LA Times, we have the Sentinel, and we have La Opinion. And we have journalists here who can also bring new voices, diverse voices, distinct voices. And again, I just go back to the mission statement of Pacifica. Our mission is to connect communities, to cross what we perceive and misperceive as boundaries, and to bring forth new insights and new information that people are not getting anywhere else.
Thank you. So that closes the first round. We can now move on to the second round of questions. This next question is question number 1. And this goes to John Suarez. What should be the LSB's primary roles and responsibilities? What should be the PNB's primary roles and responsibilities? Who should be on the LSB? Who should be on the PNB? You have 1 minute.
The roles and responsibilities for the LSB are outlined, at least basically, within the bylaws, Article 7, Section 3. And it talks about our financial responsibilities, issues that regarding the staff, particularly the finding and hiring both the general manager and the program director, doing evaluations, ensuring that the program agenda is proper. The bottom line, as I see it, as a responsibility for the LSB, is to keep the station alive and vibrant. That's our basic main role. I don't know as much about the PNB, so I'll pass on that. And in terms of who should serve in either board, or at least let's say the LSB, I think we should look for people who are dedicated and who share the philosophy of the board and the foundation, and who have experience, who have time, who have the means to take on the role.
Thank you. Grace?
I couldn't agree with John more. Dedication and the love of the Pacifica, as it has been in the past and can be in the future, and it is currently, is really paramount. You can't emphasize the importance of dedication and of caring for the station and the network. On the national board is responsible for ensuring that management does its job, of evaluating management, of ensuring that our financial reporting is done accurately and is kept up to date, and that we are putting in programs to improve our revenue, limit our expenses, plan for the future, and generate expansion, reach more people, and have a greater positive impact on society.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, the local station board has the responsibility to recommend the hire of a general manager when needed to the executive director, recommend the hire of a program director when needed to the general manager, and also to evaluate the general manager and the program director on an annual basis. We also have the responsibility to come up with a budget proposal that's submitted to the national board for approval and consolidation into the Pacifica budget as a whole. I think some of the failures recently have been to have fully functioning committees that engage our listeners in participating in some of those processes. And also, the local station board is supposed to, under the bylaws, conduct 2 town halls a year to hear listener input. I think we need to do those. The national board has a responsibility to recommend the hire and evaluate the executive director and the chief financial officer, as well as developing the audit process, hiring an auditor to review the books. I think all those things need to be done.
Thank you. Jeff?
Well, part and parcel, and continuing with Michael, with what Michael just started with, I think ultimately, in addition to these very specific undertakings, what the boards are really called upon to do is to help bring vision, to advise, to bring to bear resources that perhaps people who are currently running programming or managing the station or producing shows may or may not have, so that we can supplement what is already in place, what exists, with vision, with resources, with ideas. And collectively, each one of us can bring to bear something that one or the other of us might not have thought of, or might not know of, or might not be able to deliver on. And I think collectively that's why we have these boards. It's a group of people who are passionate, who care deeply about the station and about the community.
Thank you. John, you can readdress.
Well, I think we're all in agreement based on what I heard. Besides the roles and duties that are outlined in the bylaws and some other things that were added in the last few minutes, I go back to the point that I made that the board has to see itself as the one responsible agency to keep the station alive and going, and to make sure that the programming and its activities are vibrant and pertinent to our society and to our current needs. And the best way, based on my experiences with other boards, is that the more dedicated and committed the board members are, the better the results. And the hope is that we elect people who have that commitment and that dedication.
Thank you. Next question goes to Grace Aaron. This is question number 3. Community advisory boards. Only 2 of the 5 Pacifica stations are in compliance with the CPB requirements for having a CAB. Do you think that having a functioning CAB is necessary? Why or why not? What are the primary roles of a functioning community advisory board? You have 1 minute.
Oh, yes. A community advisory board at each station is absolutely necessary. The reason for this is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting stipulates that each station must have a community advisory board in order to get Corporation for Public Broadcast funding. We lost our Corporation for Public Broadcast funding a few years ago, and that's lost us several $1 million in funding. In the past, 10% of the income of the stations has come from the CPB, so that's a huge loss for us. Only 2 of our stations have community advisory boards. I'm going to make sure as a national board member, I'm currently on the national board, that we get community advisory boards going at every single station, that they keep proper minutes, that they meet regularly, and that they're functioning and are a resource that's beneficial to the management of the stations.
Thank you. Michael?
KPFK has had a few stymied efforts to revive the Community Advisory Board. Often they hire someone and then a series of meetings are held, but there's not a functioning body. I think the critical responsibility of the CAB is to conduct a needs assessment of the community, and I think that's what's been missing for a long time at KPFK. I think we need to create a body, and then it should conduct surveys and by other methods determine what are the unmet needs of the listeners. We have a huge audience potentially from Santa Barbara through LA and Orange County down to San Diego, and I think we can find out things from our audience, from our listeners, and from potential listeners who are not currently listening to KPFK about what kinds of programming they need and what the station should do. So I think that would be a vital component, along with the local board, along with a program council, and along with the committees of inclusion to make this a functioning station.
Thank you. Jeff?
Well, I think we have the 2 major reasons stated why it's absolutely vital to have these to have the cabs. First, I don't think there's any better means to really connect with, understand, relate to, and provide service to all the various diverse communities in Los Angeles. We have to do that through outreach. That's what cabs are about. And then secondly, we know that we are in financial straits, and we cannot compromise any potential source of financing, CPB or otherwise. And I think by having the cabs, we'll have access to a host of foundation funding, CPB funding, et cetera, and we'll be intimately, much more intimately connected with the communities and much better positioned to provide programming that serves the community's needs.
Thank you. John?
The notion of a cab is dear to my heart because I served on the cab and I was a president for several years at KCT, as I mentioned, when it was still connected with PBS. We acted as a liaison between the community and the staff and the board. And I think we did a remarkable job. We were very active. Our group was large. It was a motley group, motley in the usual sense of the meaning that we came from all over the place. And we were very involved with the community. And those were very enjoyable years sitting in that situation. And we were able to bring feedback on programming, on community relations, on staffing, back to both the board and the staff. And therefore, that model, which I know about, is the one I recommend, and we certainly, under any circumstance, we should have a cab.
Thank you. Grace?
Yeah, I think that I will do my best to have John spearhead with me. I'll support him in getting a cab going at KPFK and possibly writing a little handbook or manual of how it should be done well for the other stations. And we have a group of candidates from the Committee to Strengthen KPFK. We sent out this postcard. You can see it with all our faces on it. John is on our slate, and I'll make an effort to recruit anybody who doesn't win this local board election to participate in a community advisory board, because they're great candidates, and if they don't win the election, they'd be great, I think, on a cab, especially with John's leadership, because he has the experience of participating in a cab.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. This is question number 10, and it goes to Michael Novick. What suggestions do you have for further development of KPFK social media, Area 941 podcast library, and the KPFK video channel? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think that these are vital things. I think that, as I said earlier, I think we need to imbue more of our broadcast operations with the many-to-many ethos of social media. I think that too much of the use of social media at KPFK is still tied up in the broadcast approach of one-to-many. And I think that encouraging the use of live streaming on Facebook or other video mechanisms is vital. I think that we need to partner with other media providers to produce audio, video documentaries on topics of interest. I think that the use of social media to create a dialogue, not just between the listeners and the programmers, but among the listeners, so that people have a sense that what they're saying is contributing to finding solutions and charting new methods, is vital.
Thank you. Jeff?
I don't know that I got all of your questions. I think it was a three-parter.
So I'll repeat it.
Okay.
What suggestions do you have for the further development of KPFK's social media, Area 941 podcast library, and the KPFK video channel?
Well, I'm with Michael. We need to move into a variety of platforms. People don't always listen to programs when they're scheduled. They listen to programs when they fit into their lives. So I would start primarily, in our case, with really cultivating our podcast platform, both for existing programming so that people have opportunities to listen when they may not be on the air, but also to cultivate and diversify the programming offerings and to determine community needs by virtue of feedback, and to identify programs that really work. Social media, by definition, is a huge form of outreach, of marketing in a way, of communicating ideas very succinctly, and we absolutely need to cultivate more opportunities in that direction as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John?
I'm rather ignorant about social media, partly probably a function of age and a function of the fact that I don't like gadgets. I like much always prefer person-to-person interactions. Nevertheless, I'm very aware that social media is where we're at now, and it's a wonderful mechanism or pathway to elicit listeners, to get our message heard. So in ignorance, I support social media and that we should be in it.
Thank you. Grace?
Yeah, social media is the future, podcasting, and smartphones have become ubiquitous, and that gives us tremendous latitude to expand the variety and diversity of our programming, because it doesn't have to all be on the air on terrestrial radio, which, of course, terrestrial radio is still very strong. But we can put on our website and podcasts all kinds of material that isn't heard anywhere else. So and everybody and their uncle. I mean, little 5-year-old kids have smartphones, and low-income people have smartphones. High-income people, it's really the wave of the future. People are giving up their landlines. They've got smartphones, and they use them, and we can reach them that way, and especially if we have unique offerings that other people don't have.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I think the social media, the podcasting, are important ways also to take advantage of the Pacifica Radio Archives, which is a underutilized resource that the station has access to. We house the archives here at KPFK, but they're a part of the Pacifica Foundation as a whole. I think that it's also an opportunity for us to connect with campus groups from the high school to the university level around the area, and tap into some of the creative efforts in the community. One of the responsibilities of Pacifica is to provide outlets for the creative expression of the community, and I think that social media is a vital way to do that.
Thank you. Moving on to the last question, which goes to Jeff. It's number 11. Should the LSB involve itself in programming? I know we've been talking a lot about programming, but there is a lot of conflict, I think, around this question. Describe the extent of this involvement and the pros and the cons.
Well, I certainly think the LSB should be involved in programming. Whether it has the determinative authority to schedule programming and to greenlight programming is an open question. But it's clear that the programming strategy and the programming that we have in place is not attracting a big audience. We are not a go-to station in Los Angeles. We are not providing cutting-edge programming. We are not launching new voices. We're just simply not. That's the plain truth. So I think with the right composition of the LSB, again, people with very unique, interesting, passionate voices and resources, we can bring ideas to bear, we can find voices, and I think we can help the station improve the programming.
Thank you. John?
I would say that in terms of programming, the LSB has a role, although the ultimate responsibility probably should be with the program director. However, he should be amenable and open to feedback from all sources. The LSB can adopt program policies, and of course, it's commissioned to evaluate the programming periodically. But the final responsibility should rest with the program director in consultation with formal evaluations that are done about the programming, feedback from the LSB, and feedback from either or both the Community Advisory Board and the Program Council.
Thank you. Grace?
Yes, the local station board can set programming policy. The local station board also evaluates the program director and can decide if the programming isn't improving enough that the program director should be either warned or possibly removed. That the local station board has that power to do that. And also the local station board evaluates the general manager as well. It's also the general manager's responsibility to make sure that the program director is doing his or her job well. So the local station board can certainly also give resources in terms of information, a program council, helping with the formation of a community advisory board, doing market research that helps the program director and general manager to improve programming.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, I think that the local station board should reactivate its program oversight committee, which does have responsibility to make sure that programming decisions are being made in a fair and above-board manner, and if there are any complaints by programmers, that they could be addressed by the management. I think that the local station board should act to rebuild or recreate a program council and appoint members to that council to work with the program director. And I agree that also the local board should put people on the national board who have an interest in creating national programming that's not just the syndication of local shows, because I think that ends up defeating the purpose. The local show loses its local content, and the national show does not have sufficient resources. So I think that pushing for national programming through the PNB that uses the strengths of all 5 stations is the way to go.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I don't think we can program by committee, but I think we can improve programming by committee. And I think the board is very much like the cabinet to the president. I think we can bring to bear resources and ideas and work very closely with the station, with the general manager, with the programming director, and improve what our offerings are.
Thank you. So this closes the debate, and I will let each of you give a 1-minute closing statement, starting with John Suarez.
Our society, our country, the world as a whole is going through very difficult times. In some ways, unbelievably, the threat of fascism is omnipresent. And the best antidote is a free press and media, which are themselves under attack as part of what's happening. I view KPFK as a crucial entity to our future in terms of maintaining a free and democratic society. If elected, I have a very definite commitment to maintain its freedom, its ability to protect our democracy, etc. And KPFK, of all the media, is the most important venue or avenue in our what's available to us today to fight extremism.
Thank you. Grace Aaron?
Pacifica is so important. That's why I put so much of my life and time into it. It's vital, especially in these troubling times. We do not take any corporate money or big vested interest money. We're not influenced, so we are free to speak what needs to be spoken at this time. And we must improve the way we get our message across so that we can have a greater impact on society. I'm part of the committee to strengthen KPFK. We have a bunch of candidates. You can see who they are at candidateslate.org. That's candidateslate.org. We also sent out this postcard. John is part of our slate. We get along well together. I think if a bunch of us are elected to the board, we'll do a good job, improve the station and the network.
Thank you. Michael Novick?
Yeah, I think self-criticism is a vital aspect of how to deal with problems. I think it's a creative solution. I think that we need to look seriously at the problems we're facing. KPFK's audience dropped steadily through the Obama administration and has continued to drop in these 2 years of Trump. So I think we need to look internally at what we're doing wrong and how we can re-engage with our audience better. I think that Pacifica is in the finance capital, the political capital, the energy capital, the entertainment and media capital, the digital capital of the United States, and we're failing to tap those creative energies and give them a platform and a channel to speak about solutions that will engage people in a different way than NPR does without corporate sponsorship. So I want to participate in that. If people want to learn more about the history, they can go to our website is gcrc-socal.org that explains how we've gotten into this fix and how we can get out of it.
Thank you. Jeff Silberman?
Yeah, thank you. We have a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous responsibility with KPFK. We live currently with a president who's made it its mission to divide and create discord and misunderstanding and hate. And we live in a community that even prior to Trump was disconnected in many ways and not fully understanding each other. And KPFK offers that bridge, and that's what Pacifica was formed to do. With the best of intentions, the truth of the matter is that KPFK is not currently fulfilling on the mission. We don't attract a big listenership. We don't offer the kind of programming that is making a big difference in people's lives. And I think we can readily do that. We have the resources, we have the talent. As Michael pointed out, with the Pacifica Network, we are in the key cities in the nation to bring to bear many, many phenomenal resources.
Thank you. So this closes the first debate of the KPFK Local Station Board election debates. I was joined by John Suarez, Grace Aaron, Michael Novick, and Jeff Silberman. Thank you.